Good morning, everybody. My name is Erica Cleary. I'm the Health Safety Environmental Coordinator here at TREMEC Wixom. My job is to make sure that you leave work in the same condition that you came to work in, so safe and healthy so that you can go home to your families. So during orientation today, I have a couple topics I'm going to cover, but first I'm going to talk about our site PPE requirements, and then I'm going to transition into hazard communication. So to start, during this pandemic situation that we live in now, the site has implemented face mask requirements. So a surgical style ear loop face mask is a requirement for all employees, contractors, and visitors in the facility. We do not allow any non-TREMEC issued face coverings. So some folks have the homemade cloth masks or bandanas or anything like that. Those are not permitted within the facility. If you do have a mask that's like an N95 or something that's better than what we offer, you can still wear that, but you must wear that underneath the TREMEC mask. So there is a correct and an incorrect way to wear a mask. So you can see to the right there, the wrong way to wear the mask is she's wearing it inside out. So the blue side must always be worn out because that repels moisture. And then her nose is hanging out. So that does no good because your nose is a portal of entry for the virus to get into your body. So the correct way to wear the mask is blue side out with your nose and mouth covered. So when you get your mask every morning, you're going to wash your hands or sanitize your hands before handling it. With the nose wire on the top, put your fingers through the ear loops and position mask over nose and mouth, like the woman is in the picture below. You're going to place the ear loops around your ears and pull the mask from the top and bottom to fully open the folds. So when you first get your mask, it's kind of compact. So when you put it on your face, you pull it apart. Then you adjust the mask around your face, gently forming the nose wire over the bridge of your nose. So there's kind of like a hard, bendy part in the mask, and that's the part that goes over your nose, and you bend it so that there's a tight fit across your nose. Next is our clean room PPE. So PPE stands for personal protective equipment. So our clean room is where we assemble our transmissions, and it's a very sensitive product that if any fiber from your hair or clothing or anything like that gets into the transmission, there could be significant damage. So we have to wear a lot of stuff when we go in there. So our required clean room attire is your TREMEC issued face mask. You're going to have to wear a lint-free lab coat. So you see in the middle there, it's operations wear dark blue, MP&L wear light blue. A hairnet or TREMEC hat. So you see again a hairnet to protect your hair from falling into the transmission. A beard net if your beard's not covered by a face mask. So if your face mask covers a majority of your facial hair, then you will not need a beard net. TREMEC issued safety shoes. So there's safety toe. So that's either steel or composite. Leather top, non-marking soles. Visitors wear steel toe shoe covers and shoe covers. So there's going to be any temporary employees that are started through a staffing agency, once they become a TREMEC employee, we will buy them safety shoes. Until then, you must wear any other steel toes you have, and then when you enter the clean room, you must wear the white shoe covers, as you can see on the bottom. Because you've worn those shoes outside of the plant, it's a potential that they are dirty. And again, that's a clean room environment. And again, shoe covers are for our visitors or temps without TREMEC provided shoes, safety glasses, and gloves when handling parts. And it's important to note that lab coats are not to be worn outside of the clean room because these are, supposed to be a clean room environment. And if you wear it outside where it's not clean, that just defeats the purpose. And then lastly, we have a warehouse where we require folks to wear different kinds of personal protective equipment. We call area in our warehouse called the orange crush zone. That's basically because there's high forklift traffic. So you have to wear different things. So you're gonna have to wear your TREMEC issued face mask, obviously, your safety glasses and your safety shoes, but also in the warehouse, you have to wear a high visibility vest. So our normal clothes aren't typically that bright that a forklift driver could see us easily. So that's why we have to wear a vest. So our MP&L, our material planning and logistics department, wears orange. So when you're out on the floor, you'll see everybody who's in that department. And then any other pedestrian wears a yellow vest. And then you also have to wear gloves in the warehouse if you're handling parts. So that's all that for PPE use. Now I must talk about hazard communication training. So hazard communication training is probably something you've gotten at other jobs if you've worked in plants before. OSHA's hazard communication standard, so OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and their hazard communication standard requires chemical manufacturers, distributors, or importers to provide safety data sheets. They used to be called NSDSs, I'm sure a lot of people remember that, to communicate the hazards of hazardous chemical products. The hazard communication standard requires new SDSs to be in a uniform format. So what are safety data sheets? So they provide workers and emergency personnel with procedures for handling or working with products in a safe manner. So the company is required to maintain a safety data sheet for each chemical used in the facility and make them accessible to every employee in compliance with the OSHA Right to Know Act of 1970. So where do you get safety data sheets at the facility? So we have printed sheets are kept in safety data sheet binders. To the right, you can see a picture. They're bright yellow and red, very easy to find. They're located in production areas. But we also have them located online. So the binders and the paper copies are for folks that don't have access to a computer, so they can just walk up to the folder and find the safety data sheet they need. But folks that have access to the computer can access safety data sheets on our TREMEC Wixom SharePoint site. So that's where I upload all the safety data sheets, and I have a database of all of the chemicals used in the plant on there. So, and if you're ever responsible for ordering chemicals at the facility, you need to let me know ahead of time. You must send me the safety data sheet because I need to either approve or deny that chemical based on how hazardous it potentially is. Safety data sheets have a standardized and internationally recognized 16-section format. Each chemical manufacturer and distributor and shipper must follow this format and supply their customers with a safety data sheet for each chemical shipped. So anytime we order a new chemical or the company updates their safety data sheets, we have to update the SDS in our files. So here's the 16 sections. I'm not going to go through all of them. There are certain sections that I read more than others. So section 1 is the chemical identification. So that's the chemical name. I use our transmission oil as an example. It's called pentosan FFL4. That will be in that section. Section 2 is the hazards identification. So that's going to tell you what the physical and health hazards are associated with that chemical. So for example, if the chemical is flammable, you're going to find that in section 2. If it's a carcinogen, meaning it causes cancer, that's going to be in section 2 as well. Skipping to section 4 is the first aid measures. So that's what you would do if anyone is exposed to that chemical. So if they get it in their eyes, on their skin, or in their mouth, how do you treat that person for that kind of exposure? Section 5 is the firefighting measures. So that's important to know, if there's ever a fire associated with that chemical, what do you do and how do you put it out safely? Section 6 is the accidental release measures. So that's what you do. You want to read that section if you ever spill that chemical into the environment. And then skipping over to section 9 is the physical and chemical properties. So I look at that section to find information about the flash point of the chemical, if it's a solid, liquid, or gas, the boiling point, all kinds of stuff like that. And then section 10 is the stability and reactivity of the chemical. So is it a stable chemical that you don't have to worry about reacting with others, or is it a very reactive chemical? So here's a sample safety data sheet. This is for something called a Megacide FD, which is a germicidal solution. It's not actually something we have in the plant, but it's something I use as an example. So looking at section 4, like I mentioned, is for first aid measures, right? So as a safety professional, I want to read that section to know what to do if somebody is exposed. So for example, if you get this solution in your eyes, you rinse with water for at least 15 minutes. Remove contact lenses if present after 5 minutes, and then continue rinsing your eye. If irritation persists, seek medical attention immediately. So that's what the safety data sheet tells me to do if anybody gets that chemical in their eye, which is good information to know. Chemical labels. So manufacturers must follow a standard format for the labeling of hazardous chemicals. The information on the label must match the information on the safety data sheet. So there are 2 types of labels you're going to see in this facility and 2 types of labels I'm going to train you on. So these are called hazard communication GHS labels, or globally harmonized system labels. So these are labels you're going to find on the original container from the manufacturer. So when a chemical is shipped to our facility in its original container that it was shipped in, it's going to have this kind of label on it. And there are certain elements of the label that must be on there to meet the hazard communication law set out by OSHA. So here are the elements I'm going to walk through with you in an example label. So here's a sample label. We don't know what kind of chemical it is, but this is what the label would kind of look like. I'm going to walk through what all of the required elements are. So first is the contact information of the responsible party. So the name, address, and telephone number of the manufacturer. So who made this chemical? Where did it come from? Our transmission oil is made by a company called Fuchs. So that would be on the label. Fuchs, their address, and their telephone number will be on here. The product identifier, so how the hazardous chemical is identified. So the name of the chemical, so whether it be isopropyl alcohol, or again, our transmission oil, which is called pentosan FFL4. That's going to be the product identifier, which is at the top. Next is a signal word. So that signal word indicates the relative level of severity of hazard. So danger is used for more severe hazards and warning is for less severe hazards. So whatever this chemical is, this sample chemical, it says danger, so it means that it's a more severe hazard. Next, pictograms. These convey specific information about hazards of a chemical and symbols and other graphic elements. So looking at this picture, it's pretty obvious that it's a flame, which would mean that this chemical is flammable. So I see this label actually in real life as well. You know, I have hairspray at my house that I use to style my hair with, and it's an aerosol can. And as we know, hairspray is flammable. So that kind of label would be on there as well. So you'll see these things in real life too. Next is a hazard statement. So that's a statement assigned to hazard class and category that describes the nature of the hazards of a chemical, including where appropriate the degree. So we could tell by the pictogram that the chemical is a flammable chemical, but looking at the hazard statement, it kind of dives a little deeper and lets us know that it's an extremely flammable gas. Next are precautionary statements. So these describe recommended measures that should be taken to minimize or prevent adverse effects resulting from exposure to a hazardous chemical or improper storage or handling. So looking at this, it says whatever this chemical is, it says keep away from heat and open flames, no smoking, eliminate all ignition sources and store in a well-ventilated place. So judging by that, obviously we know it's a flammable and it's an extremely flammable gas, and looking at the precautionary statements, we should know that you don't want to keep it somewhere where there's going to be, exposed to heat, like a welding shop or something like that. So all this information should be on the label to let you know the hazards. So we talked about the flammable pictogram, but there are several others. So I'm just going to run through what those are briefly, and potentially things that you could possibly see at the site. But a lot of them you won't, because a lot of our chemicals are very mild. So skull and crossbones on the left. That means the chemical is acutely toxic. So I have no other nice way of saying it. It means that the chemical will kill you quickly. An acutely toxic chemical, if you think about something like carbon monoxide. So that's like the colorless, odorless gas that you have a sensor for in your house to let you know that it's present and you want to leave immediately because you can't see it or smell it. So that's something that's acutely toxic. It will kill you quickly. The right is an exclamation point. You'll see that on chemicals that are skin and eye irritants, skin sensitizers. Those could also be acutely toxic or harmful. They have narcotic effects and could be a respiratory tract irritant. On the left are corrosive chemicals. So these would be on like acids, right? So they could cause serious eye damage and damage to the skin. As you can see in the picture there, it looks like it's burning that person's hand. And on the left there, it looks like it's burning. What that actually is, it's like burning a metal bar. So that means it's corrosive to metals. On the right is health hazards. So you'll see that on chemicals that are considered carcinogens. So chemicals that cause cancer. Those could be respiratory sensitizers, reproductive toxins, meaning they're toxic to your reproductive organs. Target organ toxins, that basically means that they affect a specific organ, whether it be your lungs, it could be your heart, it could be your kidney or your liver. It has a target organ that it affects specifically. It could be a mutagen or a breathing hazard, an aspiration hazard. Next are explosives. So luckily we don't have to worry about that here. We don't have any explosive chemicals here, luckily. And then on the right again are flammables. So that's what you're going to probably see the most. We do work with a lot of aerosol cans that have brake clean in them, and brake clean is flammable. Next are gases under pressure. So these are, compressed gas cylinders. We do have these in the facility. There's a station on our line where we use CO2 to cool a shaft, to make it shrink, to then later press fit gears onto it so that it has a tighter fit. So you'll see that here as well. On the right are oxidizers. So those are chemicals that can emit oxygen and increase the risk of fire. Luckily, we don't have to worry about those here. So we talked about the GHS labels. Those are on the original container. But sometimes you got to transfer something to a different container. You know, in the assembly room, we don't have enough room to fit a bunch of 55-gallon drums of stuff in there. So we're going to transfer it to a smaller bottle, like you can see on the right there. That's called a secondary container. So that's when you transfer a chemical from its original container to another container. So you took it out of its beautifully labeled original container and put it into something that has no label on it at all. So we're responsible for making sure that it's labeled so that people can still know what's inside that bottle and what the hazards are. So a common OSHA violation are unlabeled bottles. So you can see at the top, I took that picture when I first started here about a year and a half ago. That was kind of an issue where people put stuff in containers and never labeled them. So it's very important that there's a label on this container, but we allow a different kind of label on these kinds of secondary containers, and it's called the NFPA Hazmat Diamond. So this is a standard system for identifying the hazards of materials aimed at helping emergency responders properly respond to fires, chemical spill, and other emergencies. So it's a diamond with smaller colored diamonds inside it, and there's a numbering scale that's used on a scale from 0 to 4, 0 meaning no risk, 4 meaning high risk. So I'm going to walk through that real quick. So the blue diamond stands for health hazards. So if you see a 0, that means that it's a normal material that poses no health hazards. But on the other end, if you see a 4 in there, it means that the chemical is a deadly hazard, so very, very hazardous. I use our transmission oil as a example. You'll see a 1 in there. So it means that the chemical has a slight health hazard. On the top is flammability hazards, obviously easy to remember because it's red. If you see a 0, it means that the chemical will not burn, no matter how hot you get it. And then 4, if you see a 4 in there, it means that it has a flash point of less than 73 degrees Fahrenheit, meaning that it doesn't have to get very hot for it to burn, you know, a little bit warmer than room temperature, and it'll start to light on fire, which is very hazardous. So again, our transmission oil is a 1. That means it has a flash point above 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and I know that because I read the safety data sheet. That's where I find all of this information. The yellow diamond stands for instability hazards. 0 means the chemical is normally stable. 4 means it's a deadly hazard and could potentially detonate. Luckily, our transmission oil is a big fat 0. It's a normally stable chemical. We don't have to worry about that. On the bottom is the white section. You won't see numbers in there, but you'll see some letters possibly. So that means that the chemical has some other special hazards. So if you see a W with a line through it, it means it reacts to water. Very important to know if you work for the fire department or if you're an employee who, you know, has to put out a fire with that chemical that is involving that chemical. Obviously, if it doesn't get along with water, you don't want to use water to put out that fire. If you see an OX, it means the chemical is an oxidizer. And then an SA means it's a simple asphyxiant, meaning it's something that could, you know, make you choke. Luckily, our transmission oil has nothing in that white section, so we don't have to worry about that for the transmission oil. So looking at this label here as an example, we don't know what this chemical is, but looking at the blue section, that means health hazards. A 2 is in the middle of 0 and 4, so that means it's a moderate health risk. 4 on the top, we remember, is for flammability. So on a scale from 0 to 4, 4 being the highest, that means that this chemical is very flammable. The yellow diamond is for instability hazards. On a scale from 0 to 4, 0 being the lowest, that means that the chemical, whatever this chemical is very stable. And then again on the bottom, the W with the line through it, that means that it reacts to water. So whatever this chemical is, moderate health risk, very flammable, and it reacts to water. Wastewater, it's very important to know that certain things can be poured down the drain and other things cannot. So obviously soapy water, like when you wash your hands, or mop bucket water after you mop the floor, but it's not okay to ever dump chemicals, acids, or solvents down the drain, whether it be in the facility or in the parking lot. We have a third-party company called Safety Clean, and they pick up all our waste. So also, if there's ever a chemical we don't need anymore, we ordered too much, or we discontinued using it, I would call that company in to help me get rid of it. And it's important that you don't dump stuff down the drain because it affects our river, streams, and lakes and coastal waters, which is our drinking water. It's also very much illegal to dump chemicals down the drain, so please do not ever do that. So as far as our waste streams goes, so that means that the types of waste that we generate a lot of aerosol cans, like I said, because we use brake clean. It's an excellent degreaser and we use it a lot. So you can't just throw a finished or empty aerosol can in the trash. You have to puncture it so that the flammable liquids drain out. So you can see on the right, that's a aerosol can puncturing system. So what you do is you put the can in upside down in the white part, you pull the handle and there's a little pin inside that pokes a hole in the aerosol can, and you can kind of feel the pressure release and hear the liquids kind of drain out, and they're collected in that 55-gallon drum. So when you puncture the can, and all the liquids are drained out, it's safe to throw that can away because there's no flammable liquids anymore. And then propane and gas cylinders, like I said, we have those in the facility for welding purposes and on our line. Obviously, we wouldn't want to throw those away. They can be returned and repurposed. We generate a lot of oily waste rags. We use a product in the facility called Pigmat. It's a oil absorbent rag. So anything that you use to clean up oil cannot be thrown in the trash. It's considered a waste that needs to be disposed of differently than regular trash. So we have drums throughout the facility that we would use for oily waste rags. Eye wash stations. So we have two different types of eye wash stations in the facility. You want to use an eye wash station when you get anything in your eye. And if you ever have to use an eye wash station, let your supervisor know, or myself, so that we can take you to the clinic, because your eyes are very precious and we don't want anything to happen to them. So the plumbed eye wash station, we have those in the clean room. What you do is you activate the hands-free lever. There's dust covers on the top, they pop off. You want to get your eyes directly into the stream of water. If you have contacts, remove them. Hold your eyes open with your fingers and gently roll your eyes to complete flushing, and you want to flush for 15 minutes. So you can see the picture on the bottom, that young lady in the bottom, she's flushing her eyes, and that's what you would look like as well. And then in the warehouse, we have the gravity-fed eye wash stations. So what you do is you pull the handle, it activates a solution stream. It's like a saline bag that's inside. And there's weights that push the saline out when you pull the handle. So you obviously lower your face into the solution stream, hold your eyes open and flush eyes until the flow stops. At any time you ever use this, obviously you want to let your supervisor know so that we can take you to the clinic. Anything in your eyes is potentially dangerous, so we want to make sure you get checked up by a doctor. And again, my name is Erica Cleary. I'm the Health Safety Environmental Coordinator here. There will be a quiz about our hazard communication stuff we just talked about. So thank you so much.